I don't think in the last 1.5 years things have actually improved in that area. There are many instances where mobs or through mobocracy, businesses were attacked, but those businesses or investors, they did not get any kind of support from the judiciary, or they did not get any. That's why over the last 1 year, or probably more than 1.5 years, we have seen the credit to the from the banking sector to the private sector, that growth rate was one of the lowest in the last 5 decades. In the banking sector, probably, I would say that this is the sector, or in the central bank, there were some reform measures which were initiated. But that is the only area where we have seen the last 1.5 years some positive improvement. But though you know that in the just few days back, when that bill or that on the bill of this independence of central bank was brought to the finance ministry, and the finance ministry did not approve it, because the banking sector at its current state, very weak state, a fragile state, it can't really cater the need for the economy when the economy wants to become an upper middle income country probably the next 10 to 12 years. That's what I was saying, that initially those few months, probably September, October, November until December, we saw the interest within the interim government that they wanted this kind of reform document. But after that, what we have witnessed actually, very steep decline in the interest of undertaking reform agenda. So my conclusion about interim government's reform initiative is that for those initial few months, they were interested, but after that, their priorities got shifted. The last budget in June last year, what they came up with. So that also was a big surprise to us, because that was a very much in line with the past kind of trend. The central point of this whole investment issue is job creation. And we know that in August 2024, when there was a political change, the major thrust was that, the young population, they were kind of hungry for jobs.
Jobs were at the center of the whole
Jobs
debate.
were at the center of this movement. So that issue remained unresolved during this last 1.5 years. None of these contracts or deals were discussed, within the major stakeholders. And
not even with these parties which are supporting the government.
So I think I can talk on behalf of the think tanks, private and the private sector. So maybe I don't know, but I also see the response from different political forces that are parties that they were also not very much aware of.
Welcome to Podcast with Pratim. I have with me Mr. Selim Raihan, Professor Selim Raihan of Dhaka University and Executive Director of think tank SANEM. Professor Raihan is welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
But the discussion with Professor is very special for two reasons. If you are a viewer of this channel, you might have noticed that on August 5, 2024, right on the day Hasina was ousted, we had a podcast and we outlined the way forward, kind of tried to understand. And there we discussed, I remember I pointed it out to you, that Bangladesh has a habit of moving from one extreme to another. And you also expressed a concern that if that happens, then there will be a situation. So, in my opinion, there was unfortunately an effort to turn the wheel. What about you?
No, thank you. I think, of course, that concern was very much there, especially over the last 1.5 years. What we have seen that some of the forces, especially some extreme forces, in the name of mobocracy or in the way that they tried to actually impose restrictive religious values and rules and regulations, on the society as a whole. So that's what we have. That's actually what we witnessed, and gladly that the recent election, rejected many of these, ideas or many of these plans or the people who really supported those ideas. I think that's a very positive side, I would say. But that fear or that concern was very much there. Uh, but it is also true that on August 5, 2024, people sought for the change. And especially, we know that despite there were many achievements during in the last 1.5 decades during Awami League's regime, but many of their failures, especially with respect to corruption, with respect to oppression on the opposition and squeezing
Lack of
the
mandate
lack of mandate, squeezing the democratic
and
space,
uh, a kind of economic downturn.
and kind of economic downturn and a lot of, I would say, mega corruption also. There are many allegations, to this particular regime. And towards the end, very much mismanagement of the economy. Well, you remember those that 6.9 or 9.6, that interest rate regime of central bank, which is very unprecedented. You don't really see it anywhere in the world. And at the same time, corruption in the central bank in the banking sector, in the form of huge non-performing loan, tax evasion, and various other things. But then that means that the political change in 2024 August, they actually uh, created the kind of hope that people are wanting something positive, something new, which will not really take us back to what we were. Uh, so that aspiration was there. So I would say that in 2024, on August 5, there are two streams actually were happening, or running through the minds of the people. One was very much on the positive side. I would say that they wanted something, a positive change, especially with respect to democracy, with respect to corruption-free economy, corruption-free society, and the political rule based on democratic norms. But on the other side, we saw kind of uh, or emergence of some forces. They wanted to even undermine those democratic norms or the social fabric which is there in Bangladesh society, especially if we don't even say it secularism, but with respect to social harmony
I
among
mean, breaking the status
religious.
quo, breaking the
Yeah,
status quo.
yes, I would say the status quo, but it has been a long tradition in Bangladesh society that all the religions, they try to remain, in peace, especially in harmony with each other. Though there are many problems, we should not, ignore those problems. But I think that, though that the second force, the second stream actually tried to ignore all these things. They wanted to impose some very restrictive measures with respect to even women's right, with respect to minorities' right, and with respect to other values or other beliefs in the society. So I think those two streams actually ran parallelly, and we were very confused at a certain point of time whether which one is stronger than other. And then probably what we found towards the end, because that election on 12th February, I would say that it has a verdict. And in general, I think there are some probably allegations of anomalies, but I don't think that overwhelmingly, it was. I think that overwhelmingly it was very accepted by everyone, globally as well and nationally as well. And actually, I see that through this election, people actually rejected that second stream. Uh, so this is a situation what we are
So
now.
that is where the mandate is coming, actually.
Yeah,
That is where the
definitely.
mandate is coming, because the other side was too suddenly it started getting very oppressive and imposing values on others. Come from here, let's get into the status of the economy. So, I mean, where Bangladesh exactly where we all expected, I think both you and me have spoken much before the government fell, Hasina government fell, that there was a clear case that things are collapsing, right? So even if not insofar as, in the diplomatic zone in Dhaka, so the diplomats, I'm told, they used to bet that how soon the government would fall, because everyone expected the economic situation to bring it down. The revolt was expected from textile workers. That is now where things have where things are now is in the 18 months. What we perceive, or I perceive, is Bangladesh didn't have a perfect situation. Otherwise, why would such kind of a situation would happen on 2000 August 5, 2024? But over the 18 months, the legal justice system had completely broken down. That is what is felt from this side. Now, my question to you is, when it would try, the new government will try to get back things under control, right? Economy has to be brought back on the rails. So legal justice is a very important institution. You already had a case for eroded institutional values. And on top of that, there has been an erosion. Now, you can only tell us that to what extent the legal justice has broken down, because all the contracts that we see in business depend on how good your courts are.
No, I think this is a big issue. It's not only in what happened in the last or 18 months, 1.5 years, but in fact, this is a long-standing problem for Bangladesh. Enforcement of the contract, and especially when it comes to legal side. We know that the problem of independence of the judiciary, that has remained a big issue. And despite many efforts, probably have seen some changes in the provisions, but we still know that judiciary is not independent. Also, when it comes to enforcement of the contract, when it comes to actually maintaining investors' interest, especially through the judicial process, there are many problems. Both the foreign investors and domestic investors, they have a lot of complaints about it. I don't think in the last 1.5 years things have actually improved in that area. There are many instances where mobs, or through mobocracy, businesses were attacked, but those businesses or investors, they did not get any kind of support from the judiciary, or they did not get any, I would say,
There was
justice.
mobbing inside court premises.
There are, yes. So there have been. So I think now this is a big challenge for the new government. How do they really contain these forces? These evil forces. Because if you allow these evil forces to run, nobody will come to invest in Bangladesh. And even the existing investors, they actually feared. They were scared to borrow money from the banking sector and put it in the investment. That's why over the last 1 year, or probably more than 1.5 years, we have seen the credit to the from the banking sector to the private sector, that growth rate was one of the lowest in the last 5 decades. So that means that the banking sector was sitting with the idle money, and the investors were really taking up the risk to borrow money from the banking sector.
Was industry afraid to borrow money from bank because there may be some kind of action on them or something?
Yeah, so because the whole investment environment was not really suitable for investors to invest. So I would say there are many components and many issues need to be looked at why investment didn't pick up during the last 1.5 years. One is, of course, this law and order situation, and this whole process of, you don't really get the right kind of justice to the judicial process. But at the same time, you have a very high interest rate regime. The interest rate is very high. The whole idea was to contain inflation through monetary policy instrument, but actually that didn't really work well. And inflation is not only a demand side problem; it has a lot of issues with the supply side and structural issues
I'm
and institutional failures as well.
one thing here, sir. There has been a very hurried attempt to show certain things, what I understood. For example, you tried to clean your bank balance sheet overnight. From 10%, the bad debt went up to 30%. It should have been phased. And at the same time, you tried to squeeze the money flow. And at the same time, you needed to increase the money flow because the economy was going down. So what is your explanation to this?
No, definitely there are many contradicting forces actually working against each other. But with respect to this non-performing loan, I would say that I would really give the credit to the governor of the central bank because he tried to actually reveal the true picture of the non-performing loan. In the past, we have seen there were attempts to reschedule, redefine, and that's why it was all under the carpet. You don't really know that, what was the magnitude or the size of the non-performing loan. Though we had some ideas, but actually you didn't have the official figure of it. Now we know that the status of the banking sector is really bad. And this is the size of, as you rightly said, 30%, probably more than that, is non-performing loan. So that is one side. I think I would say that's definitely something praiseworthy. But on the other side of the story, what I was saying, that to control inflation through monetary policy instrument, and it did not really work well, then the government did not really pay attention to the other aspect of, how do you really control inflation? In the banking sector, probably, I would say that this is the sector, or in the central bank, there were some reform measures which were initiated. But that is the only area where we have seen the last 1.5 years some positive improvement. But though you know that in the just few days back, when that bill or that on the bill of this independence of central bank was brought to the finance ministry and the finance ministry did not approve it. That means though we discussed for years, on this independence, the importance of the independence of central bank, but at the end, even this interim government could not endorse this, idea of independence of central bank. Now, would the political government do it? That's a very big question because political government will have all these political vested interests to, keep control over central bank. That's what we witnessed in the past political governments. I hope that this new government, they will learn from the past mistakes and they will hopefully actually go for the positive changes because the banking sector at its current state, very weak state, a fragile state, it can't really cater the need for the economy. When the economy wants to, become an upper middle income country probably the next 10 to 12 years, or, face the challenges of the LDC graduation, which is going to be in the next few months by November this year.
That's a very critical situation.
Of
Because
course,
you are
that
facing
is.
a lot of things together.
We are facing a lot of things together. It's a called, shocks one after another. We had COVID, then we have Russia-Ukraine war, we have a long, prolonged phase of inflation, and then also this political change, and then it's a downturn in investment,
My
and then
question
now
here
this
is,
political change through this election.
right, so you had two problems. As on August 5, 2024, you had two problems. Political instability and economic instability, right? So in the end, if I look at the macroeconomic stability side, so from 9.5% in June 2024, just before the protest began, to 8.5%, right? Exports sliding. The only thing is the remittance, which I believe is a factor of stabilization of the forex rate, right? A little better situation. So, and what you have is some numbers about the bad debt situation in banks. So questions are two. First, ideally, the interim government should have focused on economic stability, which did they miss the bus because of their political interests? And two, on the economic side, as you said, that the banking regulation bill, now they couldn't do that, right? So Hasina government failed because it didn't have investors didn't have the option of stock market. There was no way to raise money from the stock market. It was a moving sideways since 2011, and you had a bank, so everyone was left to rig the system, the industry. I mean, kind of a situation that was. So how do you explain this? And what will be the challenges now?
So that remains a big surprise to us as well, because Soon after the interim government came to power, so they expressed interest in undertaking reforms. And they actually commissioned two committees to outline the reform agenda. One was the White Paper Committee. I was also a member of that, which looked into the past, all these misdeeds and came out with some agenda for future reform. But more importantly, the second committee, which was the task force for re-strategizing economic development in Bangladesh. So I was also a member of that committee, which actually was more forward-looking, outlining some of the critical reform measures in areas like central banking sector, taxation, trade policy, social protection, even macroeconomic
Have
management,
anything
and
been
all those.
implemented in this 1.5 years?
That's what I was saying, that, initially those few months, probably September, October, November until December, we saw the interest within the interim government that they wanted this kind of reform document. But after that, what we have witnessed actually, very steep decline in the interest of undertaking reform agenda. So in fact, some of the reform initiatives, what they undertook, especially with respect to NBR, that they wanted to split the NBR to two. One is the policy side and the implementation. But then the problem was the design was not, design was not good, faulty, and that's why that agenda was also blocked heavily. That reform initiative, the internal resistance within the National Board of Revenue was huge. They blocked the reform process. And also in various other areas, what we saw that they expressed interest in doing that, but they did not really undertake any actionable agenda to implement any kind of reform suggestions, what we suggested, what we proposed in those two important documents. So my conclusion about interim government's reform initiative is that for those initial few months, they were interested, but after that, their priorities got shifted. Their priorities got shifted more towards managing those political conflicts, especially how to get a good election, within a year or so. And that's sort of witnessed in February, on 12th February. And I don't know, probably, it is still a surprise, and I can't really
Election was
understand
imposed
because
on them. They didn't want election.
I don't know, probably that came through some kind of consensus because they had to find an exit route anyway. So a good election is a good exit. But that's remained a big surprise to us, even because that was a golden opportunity for undertaking some critical reforms, because this interim government did not have any political vested interest. So that's why
It
they
shouldn't
were
have
they
had,
could
but it
yeah
ended up
they
having.
shouldn't have. So they could actually implement some of the very critical reform measures, but unfortunately they could not.
And the country was ready for that.
So so that means that this the kind of resistance you can expect under a political government because of various political forces operating at their interest. Under this interim government, I think that situation could have been different, and they could, if they were serious about it, they could do it. But we did not really see this kind of strong initiative. Whenever they have undertaken any initiative and they saw some kind of resistance and they just stopped there. They did not proceed further.
So tried to act like another populist government.
Uh, I don't know. So that's probably will be explored and analyzed in future. People will try to dig in. What really went wrong. During these last 1.5 years, especially when it was great. There were some great opportunities to undertake or do something different. One example I can give you that the last budget in June last year, what they came up with. So that also was a big surprise to us because that was a very much in line with the past kind of trend. It was no major departure. So and then that the question we asked, why this is the interim government? You can show some difference, with respect to your spending on social sector, with respect to undertaking or showing your serious intention of some reforms. But what we saw that the budget was the national budget in June, which was submitted for the current fiscal year, was very much like, in line with the past trend. Nothing new.
It did not bring any major reform in the stock market. So as you said that the reform bus was missed. Meanwhile, people have been living under high inflation for 3 years. So it is becoming practically impossible now to take harsh measures. Any harsh measure you take will have some pitfalls, right? So after keeping people starving for 3 years, you just cannot expect them to bear anymore. There was loss of livelihood on top of the high prices. So the situation on ground is very difficult, and people will look for soaps and just some ex gracias and etc. kind of situation, populist measures. So, given that, on top of this non-performance, should you blame this government, this interim government, for being opaque in its transactions? The way, I mean, last being the US trade deal. Before that, there was some port deals. Normally, we don't see interim administrations engaging into such things. The US deal was very, very, I mean, just 2 days before the election, an interim government is going and signing something. Over to you.
No, I tend to, I would say, agree with you on few issues. One is that I'd like to add one thing. It's not only the economic inability to contain inflation by significant margin or the kind of success they could not show it, but also the whole business environment, especially, uh, building the confidence for the investors or assuring them that, okay, we are trying to, create or improve the business situation, especially ensuring the law and order situation, controlling mobocracy or this and that, so that investors, you can come and invest, because the central point of this whole investment issue is job creation. And we know that in August 2024, when there was a change, political change, the major thrust was that, the young population, they were kind of hungry for jobs.
Jobs were at the center of the whole
Jobs
debate.
were at the center of this movement. So that issue remained unresolved during this last 1.5 years.
Completely unaddressed.
And unaddressed, and the situation got worse, I would say, because of this whole, the private investment didn't really pick up. And now this whole issue of this non-transparent, opaque, kind of deals, or what they have contracts they have signed with various agents, the state like US or various other foreign companies towards the end. I think this also raises a lot of questions, especially, none of these contracts or deals were discussed, within the major stakeholders. And
not even with these parties which are supporting the government.
So I think I can talk on behalf of the think tanks, privates, and the private sector. So maybe I don't know, but I also see the response from different political forces that are parties, that they were also not very much aware of the very lengthy trade agreements, which were signed with US, or the kind of contractual things which actually they wanted to do with other foreign companies for different ports. So I think I remember many of their advisors were talking about NDA, non-disclosure agreement, But again, what this latest trade agreement with US was actually available publicly on the US website. So it was not really a very protected or secretive document. It was a public document. But this 32-page document, it has a lot of clauses where Bangladesh will be under problems. And especially the next government will be under serious problems because it has made Bangladesh's hands tied in various cases. And I can tell you that in that 32-page document, there are more than 150 instances where it is mentioned Bangladesh shall, that means Bangladesh will have to do it. But only in 9 instances where it is mentioned United States shall. So you can see that when there is a trade agreement between a superpower like US and a weaker economy, very weak economy, compared to US, Bangladesh.
No comparison to US.
Then no comparison. Then this kind of trade agreement always should have a kind of balance, right kind of balance. So in my view, this kind of trade agreement has given US special and differential treatment. which we actually used to top for LDCs or developing countries in the WTO. In WTO, when there is a GSP, is actually special and differential treatment for the developing countries in comparison to the developed countries. But this trade agreement will show you, or if you read it carefully, it will give you the impression that Bangladesh is giving US a special and differential treatment. And where a lot of privileges are given to US, but not many are given to Bangladesh. So I think this kind of agreement needed to be a draft needed to be discussed quite thoroughly, with the major stakeholders, especially with the private sector, because they are one of the major parties to either be affected or benefited out of this trade agreement. So I think the next government or the government which is going to be in power in the next couple of days or 3 days, they will face a big challenge how to execute this trade agreement. I'm quite sure this will be taken to the parliament for a discussion, and there will be some political, kind of different views on this discussion. And also from the think tanks, the trade analysts, we are also raising the concerns. But then it will be interesting to see how the new government handles this situation in the coming days.
Very unfortunate. It's something like those briefcase economies in Africa. You're just sold out before you know.
I will not really will not was I'll not use the word selling out or sold out, but I would say that this kind of as I wrote in Daily Star, that it's very risky, and it was done in a rush, and I did not really understand the whole logic of signing in just a couple of days before the election.
You could have agreed on terms and left it for the next government.
I know that India is still,
India
negotiating.
hasn't. It will be done in March.
Yeah. So I think they could just leave it for the new government with the mandate. The party.
Actually, India hasn't. There are a lot of discussions still going on under the radar, and some changes we could see in USTR. That small changes are happening. So that's really great. I mean, I think it's time for another episode on this, that how the new government, what are the main challenges that the new government would face. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bose. Thank you.